If you'd like to hear the full episode or any of the scenario archives, be sure to subscribe and click the link in our bio. Also, like and follow the Scenario Radio Show on all of our social media platforms for more real talk with the playlist. Peace.
If you had to be a single issue voter at this point, and we know most black people aren't single issue voters, but still, if you're a single issue voter, what's the single issue that you think for the remainder of the Biden presidency should get? Well, I ain't gonna say the remainder. Let's just say right now, first focus. What's the first thing that needs to be focused on in the Biden administration that you think black people should push Biden on? I'll put it that way. Royce, let me start with you. What do you think that black people should push Biden on first and foremost?
Economic mobility, man. I think we're roughly, we're getting close to about 15% of the population here in America. Almost about, out of that 13-15%, probably 3 to 5% of us, you know what I'm saying, on businesses. I think that we need to, press the issues on helping out black businesses, economically. You feel me? Now I say this lightly because I know some people will say, well, he's doing that, he's working on that stuff. It's really, black people need to be better with their money and stuff like that. I mean, it may be true. You can say that with anybody, but I feel like since Biden has came in, and this is kind of tugging to the other question you were saying about black people looking at Biden, what they expected from him, you know what I'm saying, and the savior thing or whatnot. I feel like there has been some things been ignored, economically for one, but also discrimination. As soon as he came into office, he was signing bills left and right, and it was almost like black folks were kind of sitting there just kind of waiting on, okay, all right, please say something for black folk. Please say you're gonna do something for black folk. We've been asking for this, we've been asking for that, we've been fighting for this, for the injustices, just to put a strong arm, a little more of a strong arm on some of these situations. And he turns around and signs these discrimination acts, as he says, to minorities, but it was specifically for Asians. Of course, they had to stop the Asian hate thing, which to me that doesn't make any sense to me. We're talking about these laws for the LGBTQ community. I have nothing against any of that, but it just seems like that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this, because I hear what you're saying, and about I've heard that narrative. I've heard that narrative about, for instance, the Asian hate bill. Not even the bill. He signed, for instance, an executive order that covered Asian hate. It also covered discrimination. It did cover discrimination as far as housing discrimination, which is a big thing for black people. I think it covered banking as well. I got to look at some of but a lot of that same executive orders that he had put out at that same time, some of those covered some of the very things that black people had been talking about.
But let's be real. I'm gonna keep it real with you though. I don't mean to cut you off, because you see, I've heard that narrative too. But see, I'm looking at what they're pushing. Like, okay, you may sign an executive order that has everything that you mentioned, because I was reading it just right there, like in his plan or whatnot. And as I kept reading, I was like, oh, okay, well, there we go. But what I'm focused on is what they're commercially pushing, right? Because to me, that's what matters the most. What the media pushes is what's going to influence the masses, to a sense to where you almost lose track of what that executive order is all about, because they're focusing on one or two things: the LGBTQ and the Asian community. I mean, all over the news, that narrative, they were showing clips of Asian people getting robbed and beat up and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, come on, this happens everywhere. Why are we specifically looking at Asians in this particular situation? What kind of discrimination is there against Asians? They got businesses all over the place. They have economic power all over the place. China basically owns America. To be honest, we're in debt with them. You feel me? Like, what kind of discrimination is there? And then we tag over to the LGBT community. Nothing against them, but like, I applaud them actually, because they come together and they get stuff done. You feel me? But I look on. Yeah, go ahead.
But that brings me back to my original question, which is, what is it that you think that black? I know you said economic mobility, but you didn't necessarily detail it, not nearly as much as you detailed what other people were getting. So, but I want to come back to that. What are your thoughts, Kelly, on that matter? Do you feel like that we've got something singularly that we can be pushing on? And if so, what does that look like for us? You're muted.
That's why y'all couldn't hear me. Duh.
Oh,
No, what I was saying was, because I was actually responding to Royce regarding the Asian community stuff, but
okay.
I'll get back to that in a second.
Okay.
As far as issues are concerned, there are plenty of issues that we could get behind on a singular level. First and foremost, like I'm pretty practical, right? So like I'm looking at what's on the Congress floor right now, or what could be, like what's on its way. Voting rights, like the bill is done. You know, it needs to be brought to a vote. We could all, like, honestly, every American, black, white, or yellow, needs to come together on that front. But as far as it being a black issue, it is certainly a black issue, because the reason why voting rights were disenfranchised in the first place through Shelby v. Holder almost 10 years back is because black people were actually gaining power. So we need to get behind voting rights first, for sure, because not only because that bill is already on the floor, but we can't get economic mobility if we can't vote for it. We can't get even more civil rights bestowed upon us, you know, which is our right, but we can't get them if we don't vote for it. Like, the people need to be in office in order to make a decision on it. We need to vote for those people. If our voting rights are disenfranchised even further, we're not going to be able to do that. So I would definitely say voting rights first. But to Royce's point about Asian hate and the like, and even the LGBT community, again, this goes back to the falling in line bit. They know how to mobilize on singular things, not saying they have a singular issue, but they know how to get in line. Black people do not. But also, and this is something that is not necessarily talked about a lot, but Black people have been in this country for so long and disenfranchised for so long that in order for the wrongs against us to be righted, it would literally take an overhaul of this country. It's beyond reparations at this point, whatever you think reparations are. We would need a restructuring of the Constitution in order for Black people to really be on the same footing that we deserve to be by way of the atrocities that were done against us, not just by way of enslavement, but even to present day. So the reason why other minorities are able to get what they want quicker, because let's be real, the executive order was actually pretty hollow, as you pointed out. You know, what was in that executive order wasn't just for Asian Americans. It was really for everybody, but Asian Americans were at the forefront because there was an uptick in Asian crime. Like that is statistically a fact. And it was because of the pandemic.
And it really didn't do anything. Yeah, and it really didn't do anything that the hate crime bill from back in the 90s wasn't already doing anyway.
Again, it was more of a ceremonial document to show that, hey, we understand that you're in this country. We understand that what's happening to you right now at this present moment is really because 45 was literally calling it something so derogatory and so one-dimensional and false that this particular community was being attacked because of a president that's a racist and a bigot.
Were Asians really being attacked, though? Were they really being attacked? Yes,
they are actually being attacked.
In this nation, they were being attacked at such a high percentage, or is it just clips that we've seen on news and all that? Like, really,
there was definitely an uptick.
Because of what?
Statistically,
like,
it was an uptick.
What were Asians being attacked for? For what?
Because of the
coronavirus thing, the whole COVID thing.
Well, I think a better thing to keep in consideration, the numbers that went up on attacks on Asians. I don't think it matters.
By Black people?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
They weren't saying it was against. It wasn't. They weren't saying that Black people were attacking Asians. There were some.
It was a lot of the Twittiet's followers. A lot of them took to heart what he was saying about calling it the China virus and all kinds of, derogatory things like that. And then when they would see an Asian person or somebody in the AAPI community, they would take it out on them because, they don't have two brain cells to rub together. So
that sounds funny because that sounds like some stuff that we as Black people have been going through for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. But I'm just looking at how quick. What I'm focusing on is how quick they're able to move when something like that happens. I understand when you said that we have to come together. I don't mean to cut you off, but Kelly, when you were saying that when people you said the reason why they were able to get things done is because of, you know, the way they were moving, the way they got in line. I mean, are you trying to say that Black people have never got in line or moved in some type of organized fashion to get what we
No, I'm not
want?
saying
Or,
that at all.
yeah.
But what I am saying is, again, to my original point as to why Black people don't get what we actually deserve.
Yeah.
The magnitude of the situation when it comes to the Black community in this country is going to take more than an executive order. It's going to take more than something that is just ceremonial in nature. It's going to take an overhaul of this country as a structure in order for our atrocities to be righted by white people. You see what I'm saying? With the Asian community, I'm not saying that they did not go through things, but for example, with the Japanese community in this country, they got reparations by way from being in internment camps. When I can't remember, I think it was in Detroit years ago, when that Asian man was murdered, brutally murdered with no justice, mind you. There were movements against that actually, you know, legislation came about because of it. You know what I'm saying? So when it comes to other minority groups, because on the timeline, their oppression was more fragmented as opposed to it being a culture of a country. You know what I'm saying? It's easier to take those chunks and rectify them as opposed to Black people that have not, as a whole, been made whole.
So let me ask you this, but does that mean that the perfect must always be the enemy of the good?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. But because of this country being the way that it is, excuse me, white people are acting like it has to be perfect in order for us to get some good.
I just want to also speak to this. One of the other things that I think when I've heard people talk about the Asian hate bill and things of that nature, is that when I hear people comparing it to for instance, because I've heard people literally say, well, where's a hate bill for Black people? And it's like, well, the hate crimes bill was centered entirely around that. I mean, that's what the hate crimes bill was about, Black people in the 90s.
The commission was centered around that. Like, we have entities in place that were designed to combat the racism regarding Black people. They have been
we can question whether or not they're doing their job.
That's
right, and whether they're not doing their job. But I always think it's important for us to frame the question properly, because if we're saying that there's no such thing, it's like, no, Black people created the bill that Black people pushed for is the one that allows Asian people to have a leg to stand on in the first place. And it's always been that way. It's always been us that move these things forward, and then other people are able to benefit from them. But the thing is that we have to first at least acknowledge what's actually there, and then start talking about, okay, well, what do we need to be getting next? So how do we hold them accountable to do what they said they were going to do?
This is the Scenario Radio Show. Real talk with a playlist.
That's the scenario.